You know that feeling when you grab a bargain printer off a clearance shelf, only to find the colors look washed out, the prints smear after a few weeks, and the cheap price ends up costing you 3 times as much in replacement parts and ink? I've been there, and that hesitation is why I spent a few days digging into the Canon imagePROGRAF TM300 before I even thought about turning it on. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. What I really wanted to know was whether this 36-inch 5-color plotter would actually give me the kind of reliable, color-accurate results that professional photographers and design studios need, without turning my office into a mini warehouse. When I first saw the TM300 advertised, the headline was "Exceptional Canon Print Quality," and that immediately set a high bar. The promise of Lucia TD Pigment Ink Canon's line that's supposed to be both archival and vibrant caught my eye, because I've been looking for a large format printer that can handle fine art photography prints that won't fade over time. At the same time, I was wary of the usual trade-offs. A 36-inch footprint usually means a bulky machine, and the 5-color ink system can be a nightmare on the wallet if you're not printing enough to justify the cost. That's why I set up a real-world test, printing a mix of high-resolution landscape photos, a few architectural line drawings, and a batch of marketing brochures that a small design studio would typically churn out. The first thing I noticed was how small the TM300 actually is. Canon has managed to fit a 36-inch roll-to-roll printer into a footprint that could comfortably sit on a standard office desk, leaving enough room for a laptop and a stack of paper. For anyone who works out of a home studio or a cramped co-working space, that's a genuine win. The printer's Wi-Fi connectivity also proved to be more than a novelty. I sent a 300 dpi photo from my phone, a PDF floor plan from my laptop, and even a small batch of PDFs from a tablet, all without ever touching a cable. The print jobs lined up in the queue, and the printer handled the switch between media types without a hitch, which is something you rarely get from lower-priced alternatives that force you to manually change settings each time. Now let's talk about the ink. The Lucia TD Pigment inks are definitely the star of the show. When I printed a recent sunset photograph on glossy photo paper, the reds and oranges popped with a depth that my old dye-based 4-color printer simply can't match. The 5-color setup adds a dedicated light cyan and light magenta, which translates to smoother gradients in sky areas and less banding in subtle tonal shifts. I also ran a test with a black and white architectural line drawing on matte cardstock. The lines were razor sharp, and the gray scale felt consistent from the lightest shade to the deepest black. For anyone who needs color fidelity for art prints or precise line work for plans, that extra color channel is a tangible advantage. However, the pigment inks come with a practical downside. They're more expensive per milliliter than standard dye inks, and they have a tendency to dry out if you let the printer sit idle for weeks. In my testing, after a 10-day pause, the first few prints showed a faint ghost line where the head had missed a tiny section. A quick head cleaning routine cleared it up, but it reminded me that the TM300 is best suited to users who will print at least a few sheets a week. If you're the type who only needs an occasional poster for a community event, the maintenance cost could outweigh the quality gains. Another point worth mentioning is media handling. The TM300 accepts rolls up to 36 inches wide, which is great for panoramic photos or large format proofs. But the internal roll holder can be a bit finicky with very thin media. I tried a lightweight transparency film for a client presentation, and the printer kept feeding it unevenly, causing a slight skew. It wasn't a catastrophic failure, but it did require me to manually adjust the tension a couple of times. If your workflow relies heavily on very thin or specialty films, you might need to budget a few extra minutes per job. Speed is a classic trade-off with high-resolution, pigment-based printers. The TM300 prints at roughly 10 seconds per square foot at its highest quality setting. For a 24-36-inch photo, that's about a minute and a half, which is perfectly acceptable if you're printing a handful of pieces for a gallery showing. But if you run a busy print shop that needs to churn out dozens of brochures an hour, you'll feel the bottleneck. The unit isn't built for high-volume production. It's more of a print-when-you-need-it solution. So, who should actually consider buying the imagePROGRAF TM300? If you're a freelance photographer who wants archival-grade prints without investing in a massive, industrial-scale press, this is a solid match. Small design studios that need to prototype client work think mock-up boards, presentation boards, or limited-run marketing material will also appreciate the combination of color accuracy.